everyone, PushingUpRoses here, and let's talk about the Dagger of Amon Ra. Again. Now, I know it may seem like I already did a million videos on this game. I did one that focused on the game's death scenes, I did one about Laura Bow, the protagonist, and I did a full-on Let's Play. But it has occurred to me that I haven't done a comprehensive video of this title as a whole. As many of you know, this is one of my favorite adventure games, and I'm going to tell you exactly why that is. First, a little background. This game's predecessor, The Colonel's Bequest, was designed by Jacqueline Austin and written by Roberta Williams, though since the game's release there has been some speculation about how involved Williams actually was. Regardless, The Colonel's Bequest was produced by an entirely different team than the Dagger of Amon Ra. The game boasts Roberta Williams as Laura Bow in the Dagger of Amon Ra, meaning that the game uses her character, but it's mainly the product of Bruce Balfour, who directed, produced, and designed it. Also note the change in gameplay mechanic. The Colonel's Bequest is controlled via command prompt, whereas Dagger is a point and click. But even though the most glaring disparity between these titles are the graphics, I think the biggest changes are in tone and the fact that Dagger is a more traditional adventure game. Colonel's Bequest is appropriately dour. It's very much an Agatha Christie novel with melodramatic kerfuffles and straightforward murder scenes. It's also heavier on finding events and listening to conversations as opposed to having an inventory object puzzle design. Laura herself lacks any kind of discernible character, though it's implied that she's a very astute young woman who is dedicated to her studies at the prestigious Tulane University in New Orleans. Dagger of Amon Ra goes off the rails, soars into the air at high velocity, and explodes into the horizon. Whee! It's incredibly zany. Laura is portrayed much differently as an overly optimistic Southern belle.
My destiny awaits. Nothing can stop me now.
And the murder scenes are... let's just call them unrealistic. Something I really like about Dagger that I wished you could do in The Colonel's Bequest is use your notebook. When you talk to people, depending on the subject, you open up new dialogue options that get listed in it. This is your main method of communication. I like that you can use your notes as a gameplay mechanic, whereas in The Colonel's Bequest you do get a notebook, but you can't use it. The most you get is the ability to review your notes at the very end of the game. Despite this jarring change in atmosphere and humor, and characters who are much less dramatic and way more, farcical, let's say.
You join Salvation Army, then I give you unclaimed laundry.
The game remains tense, and I found it scary as a kid. This is mostly because the first act has you going around 1920s New York as a plucky reporter. Call me naive, but I thought this game was about figuring out a burglary. Maybe I forgot about the graphic images on the box. Can you blame me? I was too busy admiring the beauty of the front of the box. Ooh, shiny. The game is very unassuming until Laura goes to the Leyendecker Museum to interview people about a burglary. A priceless artifact, the Dagger of Amon Ra, which was dug up by this stuffy guy, has been stolen and Laura is given the case. Who could have stolen it? This stool pigeon with the twitchy eye? This French minx with a sexual agenda? This guy who kinda got shafted out of being given a personality? Maybe it's the rich countess, or perhaps an angered Egyptian curator who believes the dagger belongs in its native country. Or perhaps it was Pippin Carter himself, aforementioned stuffy guy who found the artifact in the first place. Nope, not him. I cannot express how scary I thought this was as a young person. I went from eavesdropping, interrogating characters, and gathering clues to finding a corpse in an empty sarcophagus. By the way, I think this is a fine time to bring up that this character is supposed to be the relative of famed archaeologist Howard Carter. Or was, at least. One of the characters is a detective, so you'd think he could do something to make all the characters feel safe and develop a plan, but after taking some statements, everyone is just free to explore the museum while a murderer is on the loose. Dagger uses the same time mechanic that The Colonel's Bequest does, only this time there's things to help you along. When the clock goes off, that means an important event is about to happen. Some clues can help you figure out where you need to be and when, so there's less chance that you might miss something important. For example, I borrowed a notebook I found in Pippin Carter's jacket. He had some meeting times on it, so I was able to be at the right place at the right time because of that.
Tut 10:15 Egyptian Rum. Carrington 11 o'clock his office.
I don't want to say the game is easy because you can miss things that affect your game later on, and there are some pesky unwinnables you can find yourself in, but the main story is doable if you pay attention, something people seem to have trouble with. My assumption is that if you are playing a murder mystery game where you take on the role of a detective, you want the gameplay to involve piecing together evidence, interrogation, exploration, observation, prestidigitation, all the Asians, and that's what this title gives you, the chance to test your gumshoe skills. One of the very first things you do when you get to the museum is steal a drinking glass so you can eavesdrop on people's private conversations. This glass is the most important thing in your purse, right next to this raw piece of meat. I'll explain its significance later on. My favorite thing about this game is the cast of silly characters and their interpersonal relationships. Yvette is a saucy, sexually mature woman who's involved with Detective O'Reilly, an Irish drunk cop stereotype.
I'm sorry, my love. I should have known better.
You'll have to show me how sorry you are. Kiss me.
Ooh, yeah. And she's also involved with Ernie, the museum's custodian. Everyone is really a parody of the type of person they're supposed to be, but my favorite is Dr. Olympia Miklós, an extremely morbid woman who seems to have a preoccupation with death, snakes, and Wolf Heimlich, the German security officer.
Oh, I so love your scars, Wolfie.
They are yours to admire, my strudel.
Ooh, oh.
Hoopa! Very, very nice.
Also introduced is a love interest for Laura named Steve Dorian, who is a stevedore. Ha ha ha. This is the very altered voice of Josh Mandel, who played King Graham in King's Quest V.
If you look too closely, Miss Bow, you might see right through me and into my heart.
The slight romance angle was okay, but we only see Steve once in the beginning of the game and then at the very end where he helps you to stop the killer from being eaten by a vicious T-Rex display. What the fuck kind of love interest is this? Why isn't he going out of his way to stalk me and overcompensate with extreme friendliness like normal love interests? Also, what the hell is this? Giving another woman an intimate massage?
I'm just rubbing her neck.
Oh sure, Steve, and I just had this glass in my purse because I was thirsty. For 1992, this is a gorgeous game made with Sierra's creative interpreter, and the voice acting added to the CD-ROM version is...
Mr. Heimlich told me I had a call waiting on Dr. Carrington's telephone. When I arrived in his office, the line was dead, so I returned to the party.
Well, it becomes charming over time. At one point, the game sort of dives into survival horror mode where you're being chased by some asshole dressed up like the Grim Reaper, and you have to continually hide or outsmart him. This is the only point in the game where you can die by the murderer's hand. If you die before this, it's your own damned fault. Lorelei Shannon, who wrote and designed Phantasmagoria 2, was responsible for the gorier parts in this game. Remember that piece of meat I mentioned earlier? This is why it's important. If you don't give it to some flesh-hungry dermisted beetles, you will get eaten alive. Literally eaten alive. For such a charming-looking game, you can meet your grisly end in a variety of ways, including forgetting to look both ways to cross the street. Not just one way, both ways.
There are no cars coming from this direction.
You could also out yourself as a nosy reporter and get yourself axed in front of a speakeasy, which is easily one of my favorite settings in the game. But what is with all of these weird black backgrounds? They're kind of strange looking. Well, the art style of this game is based on the works of J.C. Leyendecker, whom the museum is named after. You can see his influence here in this piece and here in this one. This figure clearly inspired Laura Bow's museum attire and overall appearance. The dapper men in his illustrations are seen here in some of the eavesdropping scenes. This gorgeous illustration on the game's box is inspired by Leyendecker's art for the March 18th, 1905 issue of the Saturday Evening Post. So we've established that this game has a lot of lovely traits, but despite it being enjoyable, the end of the game, or Act 6, gets ridiculous. Not only are you supposed to solve the murder case, but you're also supposed to be exposing other crimes going on between these characters, collecting evidence, and finding the Dagger of Amon Ra. After you catch the murderer, you're greeted by the coroner who will now grill you on what you've learned. This test is just punishing, even if you've figured out some of the crimes. If you don't have the correct evidence in your inventory to back up your answers, you lose. If you get too many questions wrong, you lose. If you weren't paying attention, you really, really lose. I wasn't exactly expecting this many motives to choose from because even though I did figure out who the killer was, I still had no idea what his motive was. It could have been because he was having a bad day, I don't know. It's like studying for a huge science test and using a detailed outline your teacher gave you for reference, and you think you have everything memorized and under control, and then you see the test and there's answers you you never even thought about, so you just gotta guess and hope for the best. Except in this situation, you get murdered if you don't get the answers correct. Unlike the Colonel's Bequest, which grades you on how you played the game, Dagger expects you to be able to use what you've learned. I like this idea, but I don't like how stupidly hard this little murder quiz is. The game is also not very cohesive. Like I said, the first act is very unassuming, then you spend an entire act eavesdropping, then exploring, then running away, and now I'm being quizzed. It's a whirlwind of strange events, but I can't help but love every second of it. Every time I play this game, I find something new that I hadn't found before, and I think the characters are truly memorable, each with their own quirky personalities, even though some of them teeter on being offensive. With unique mechanics combined with bizarre humor and a fun setting to navigate, this has become one of my favorite games. I will leave you with this seductive scene where this flapper tries to entice Laura with her sultriness, voiced by writer of Gabriel Knight, Jane Jensen.
Hiya, dollface. Looking for a good time? It's your loss, Toots. I'll be right here if you change your mind. Oh, yes. Touch me again.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video on the Dagger of Amon Ra. I promise this will be my last video on this game. But I might be crossing my fingers behind my back. You can't prove a thing. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for more retro goodness, and be sure to share this video with other Laura Bow lovers, all 12 of you. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.